Need something to write on and write with. Somebody's already there. Oh, Neil needs a haircut. Okay. Let's get going. Is this frequency in use? Oh, nothing heard. This is W2NDG, starting the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. First, let's pause for any emergency or priority traffic. Please come now. All right, nothing heard. And once again, this is W2NDG, Neil, on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. We meet here every Sunday night at 8 p.m. to discuss various topics, science and technology, not always ham radio related. Frequently, I'll come up with a topic, or my co-host Jim will. And tonight, we're going to let the listeners drive the topics tonight. So we're trying to keep things a little lighter through the summer here. People are off in many different directions, doing many different things, and tend to be a little more exhausted at the end of the day this time of year. So keep things light, keep things shorter, and not quite as deep in the discussions. Anyway, last week we talked about numbers. I had thought of a subject for tonight that was a little offbeat, but depending on what happens, I can throw that at everybody if they want to pick that up. But first, let me drop and see if my co-host is around. I know he had plans tonight, but he might be back by now. Jim, K2BHM, are you here tonight?
Here's K2BHM. I am here. I'm not sure how long I'm going to last. This back issue is really knocking the stuffing out of me.
That's fine, Jim. Don't overdo it, please. I certainly understand. And we'll keep things light tonight. All right. Well, thanks, Jim. And I think what we're going to do is we're just going to start right in with check-ins and see who's out there and see if we can find a topic tonight. Like I said, we can keep things light and short tonight. That is fine with me. So if you'd like to check into the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net, you can do that here. And you give me your call sign, your first name, and your location. Call sign, first name, location. Please come now.
Mr. EYQ phone. Looking for my car in the parking lot. November 2 Foxtrot Zulu Charlie, Tom in Fishkill. Hello. KB2 GGS in Kirkland. Serious. K2LD, Bob.
All right. I've got N3EYQ, Paul and Rosendale, N2FCC Tom, Fishkill, KB2GGF, Matt from Carhunxon, KD2VAH, Jim in Poughkeepsie, and K2LD, Bob in Tannersville. Is there anybody I missed? Anybody who would like to check in? If not, we'll get things on the road. So anybody else, please come down.
KJU, Jet, Australia.
All right, thank you, Jed. Well, that makes 8 of us total. It's enough to have a decent conversation. So, like I said, I don't have a specific subject for tonight. I know we've been talking a lot about HF today. My topic was kind of weird, as you guys know. I tend to come up with things that are completely unrelated to ham radio, and but I was going to bring up the topic of dirt, soil, earth, what's in it, stuff like that. Talking about, the fact that you can have clean dirt, which doesn't make any sense to some people. But anyway, we don't have to talk about that. That's fine. The other thing I was thinking is because at the Tivoli sale yesterday, I picked up a scanner for a couple of bucks, a really nice Radio Shack one, desktop scanner. One of the ones that picks up VHF low, high, UHF, and 800, 900 megahertz, 200 channels in 10 banks, and I was actually impressed with how well it worked. It doesn't do digital, it doesn't do trunking, but it does everything else, and it was definitely a good $2 spent. So if people want to talk about scanning and listening to municipal and other frequencies or anything else, if not, mention what you want to talk about. Come up with a subject, just like we do on Dave's Thursday Night Net. So let's start at the top. Jim, K2BHM. Anything you want to talk about tonight?
Nothing comes to mind offhand. Figured we were just going to see what's going on out there and see if somebody's got some topic or something that they want to bring up, or some question or problem or whatever that they'd like some background on.
All right, that's fine. And let's roll down to the next. Paul from Rosendale, Bloomington, Maple Hill, somewhere around there. Anything you want to talk about tonight, or any ideas?
What scanner did you get anyway? Let's see, 200 channel, probably goes 25 through, might even do 1.2 gig. I had one that had to do 1.2 gig. Oh well. And again, I got a 800 megahertz scanner too, but some of them are really hard to program. Tough. How many new ones do I have got? One in the car, two, you know what I mean.
I forget the model. It's a basic one. It doesn't do 1.2 gig. It does 29 megahertz through like 9 something. It's not computer programmable, but it was pretty straightforward to, front panel program it. I quickly programmed 4 banks into it. Ulster, Dutchess, Orange, and New York State frequencies. It looks like it's probably made by GRE, as a lot of theirs were. Some of theirs are unit in, obviously, but a lot of them were GRE. So nothing fancy. I've had so many of them come and go over the years. Frequently when I buy like a box full of radios, there's always a lot of scanners. And sometimes I'll keep one. But, Most of the HTs I have are, fine for receiving that kind of thing. But the last couple I've gotten, I've held on to. So I don't know. We'll see. I might send them down the road again. You never know. All right, Tom, into FCZ and Fishkill. Anything on your mind tonight?
Good evening, to FCC. Tom here in Fishkill, where it was raining. I think it might have stopped. Scanners. I have a Radio Shack Pro 2052. Does all the usuals and 800 megahertz trunking. I tried on 2 occasions to get the trunking to work, and it doesn't seem to. Follow the conversations. What I have programmed now seems to work better than the last time I tried, because it seemed to get more on 800 megahertz. But I currently have 800 megahertz locked out because if something's going on, fire or whatever, it seems to lock up on 800 megahertz. To the extent that I don't hear like Dutchess County Fire and so forth. But I like the scanner. It's a really nice scanner. I forget how many channels it is. It's got like 10 banks. Probably, I think it's 1,000 channels. It's pretty cool. So I remember my first scanner was it took crystals. I said Radio Shack and Wappingers. I've got the scanner, and then you had to see what crystals they had. So Bearcat had like 8 channels or something like that. Anyway, so that's the scanner I got. I was thinking about getting a dedicated 800 meg trunking scanner, so I could have that doing the trunking stuff, and this one doing the other analog stuff. So this is into FCC back to that.
All right, Tom. Thanks. I had one trunking model at one point, and I remember that there was a change made to most trunking systems that required a firmware update of some kind to the radio, which I did, and then it worked fine. I used to use that one down on the island, and it worked well with the Suffolk County trunking system, which the Suffolk police were on that. Then I had another one that did a couple of digital modes as well, but I never really spent a lot of time learning that one. It was more of a flip. I picked it up cheap at a garage sale. It needed a very minor repair, and I just sent it down the road. Used the profit to buy something else. At some point, I wouldn't mind investing in a better one. But there's ways to do this in software now using my SDR setup. I don't know. I might experiment with that a little bit more. So we shall see. All right. Matt, KB2GGF. Anything you want to talk about tonight, or any comments on scanners so far?
Thanks, Neil. KB2GGF here, and I'm beginning to think that I might live in a time capsule. I'm embarrassed to say that the band chart I've been using is out of date, and the frequency allocation for various license classes has changed. And, I just printed out this chart 30 years ago on my dot matrix printer. Oh, the fuck, it'd be out of date. Well, not me, but boy, am I wrong. Looked at the new chart, and the good news is I got another 75 hertz space on 80 meters. Good. Scanners. I think I might have Tom's old scanner, or one just like it. It's Radio Shack, takes crystals. It's got 8 toggle switches to select each channel, to put it in or out of a scanning mix, scanning location. And sucker still works. It's kind of useless to me because I have to hunt up crystals and all the others, but still have it for some reason. And dirt, soil, yes. I'm a compost thing. I make a lot of compost. Anything that I can compost, I compost. Put it in the garden. That helps the soil. And that's about it for now. going on. Back to them.
Thanks, Matt. And I'll apologize to anybody watching me on YouTube. I do have a little poison ivy in my right arm, and I keep scratching at it. I picked up a scanner in a scanner lot. I bought a whole bunch of radios from a guy in New Jersey at one point. And, Jill and I had gone to pick them up, and it took me a while to sort through everything. It was so much stuff. I really wasn't expecting it. The guy had put a couple of pictures on Craigslist, and I really wasn't expecting how much he had. But one of the scanners was a Bearcat, a model I'd never heard of before. And it had switches across the front, like 16 of them with LED lights, like a typical crystal scanner would have. And I think and a couple of buttons, momentary switches, actually, like slide switches that sprung back. And there was also a lot of crystals in one of the boxes in Ziploc baggies. So I figured, as I was testing some of these scanners, I'd pop one open and see what kind of crystals I had. So I popped the case open, and there was only one or two crystals inside of it, and they weren't in sockets. Let me drop. This is W2NDG on the Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. So I'm wondering what's going on here. How could this thing not have crystals? So I looked up the model online, and it turns out this particular scanner was Bearcat, the company before I think they were owned by Uniden, was their first programmable scanner. And the way you programmed the thing was with binary numbers. And they had a programming chart in the manual, which I was able to retrieve online. And there was a whole chart that you would use to enter frequencies. Would list common scanner frequencies, and then the 1 through 16, up, down, up, 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 down, down, up, down, and one of the switches would determine the band, or a couple of them, and just really interesting how it worked. And for the frequencies that weren't in the chart, there was a mathematical formula, and it kind of helped, because not all of the frequencies I wanted to program were in that range of the form that the formula gave. It kind of helped drawing on my old math lessons of how to convert binary to decimal and the reverse. So it was kind of cool. I programmed a few frequencies into it, and it worked. And I believe I sold it at one of the Hamfests. But it was kind of cool. So let me drop. I have never intentionally done any composting. When I had the Tilson house years ago, though, I kept dumping my grass clippings in the same spot. Being a new homeowner, a new lawnmower owner, and everything else, really didn't understand what was going on when my wife complained about this horrible smell coming from the vacant lot. And I was like, well, that's weird. And I went out, and it was emanating from where I had been dumping all my grass clippings. And I said, oh. So I asked my father-in-law, and he said, oh, no, you can't dump them in the same spot. That's what's going on. He said, you're going to have to, get your big steel rake and spread them out. So I went out there with my steel rake, and it was getting dark already, and I cut into this pile with the rake, and the heat that came out of it was so intense that I had to back off and wait for a while. So that was my first lesson about how that stuff works. So don't do that. W2NDG. We just throw it back to Matt for a quick comment.
Yeah, you got to get that good carbon-nitrogen balance, and a lot of area, and a lot of quick and won't stink, and everybody's happy. But I like it because I'm making more planet Earth. Maybe it's my only accomplishment when I leave here is there's a little more soil. Back to me.
True, a lot of us contribute to composting upon our exits. All right, Jim, KD2VAH. Anything you want to comment on so far, or do you have another subject?
got one scanner that sits on the bench, and I use it for everything. I liked it so much. It was a Bearcat Uniden or whatever you call it. And I bought another one I want to put in the truck. I'm still trying to figure out the legalities of that. I don't want it for listening to police, ambulance. I want it for listening to other repeaters. And I got two handheld. One is an ancient one. It's like 20 years old. An A and R. It's called an AR 1500 wide range monitor. Now it just picked up this band and holding the antenna in the proper spot. I actually heard you guys. And another one's an old Radio Shack that has like 60. I think it holds like 60 channels. So yeah, I like monitors. Like I said, I've got a brand new one sitting in the box I just got last week. It's going to get mounted in the truck. Just trying to figure out either how to hide it or justify it.
Yeah, it can be a little bit of a gray area. It's a little easier for us as ham operators, but there's still things you're not supposed to be using it for. It's interesting, you know. And as we all know, even if we are within the bounds of our licensing, there are certainly officers of the law out there that don't seem to understand how that works. So lots of stories about that. So I've had so many over the years. I will say, anybody who has one of the Radiotti GD77s with the aftermarket firmware, the open GD77 firmware, does make an excellent scanner, at least in the bands that it's capable of receiving, because most HTs are not great, police, fire, and municipal scanners, because they scan at a pretty slow rate. The GD77 has a super fast scanning mode, and you can set up a whole zone for scanning. When you hit the up button, I believe, it will automatically switch to scanning the zone you're currently in. So it's perfect. So I have one zone just for scanning on that. Anyway, all right. We're getting some questions on YouTube here as well, which I'll hit as soon as we're done with everybody else. Bob, K2LD, any comments on subjects so far, or do you have a new one?
Well, I'll do a little of both. I do have an old scanner that I rarely use now, a Radio Shack Pro 37, which provided me with a lot of entertainment back in the years when cell phones were not really digital. They were kind of analog, and this thing picked them up very well. And being up on the mountain here during the party days, hearing the cries and the agony of like New Year's Eve, I miss you so much, was really quite hysterical to listen in on some of those cell phone conversations. Not that I would do that intentionally, but it picked it up, so I had to listen to see what I don't want to hear. And since I got the SDR playing, I don't really use the scanner much at all for anything, because there's just a little bit, way too much to look at on that. And if you want a change of pace for a topic, it might be a little bit too much for tonight, I don't know. But the subject of counterpoise for different antenna systems, I think that might be something interesting to go at, because everybody's getting into these random wire, long wire antennas. And I started looking into it, and there's quite a bit of variable information, let's put it that way. And I'll throw it back to you.
All right, that's fine. And that is, I may push that one to Dave on Thursday. That's definitely more in line with his stuff. But yeah, that would probably go a little too long tonight, and I haven't done my research yet. I've done a lot of random counterpoise experimenting, including when I used to do Nissaquag down on the island and set up at the picnic area. I used the fence as my counterpoise a couple of times, and would kind of help on different bands on and off depending on whether I used it. So, and yeah, cell phones, analog cell phones, because other countries pushed encryption and digital technology, but here the carriers said, we don't want to spend that kind of money. We'll just make it illegal to listen to it and push that through the government. And that's why scanners still to this day are missing, most of them, that portion of the band. But what was funny is that if you had an old UHF manual tuned television that went up to channel 83, it's 83 or 88, I can't remember, but that top part of the UHF TV band that they lopped off when analog cell phones came. If you had one of those old TVs, you could tune around, and using the click tune and the fine tune, listen to phone calls on your TV. Yeah. And the carriers wanted everybody to believe that it was secure and nobody could listen to you. Yeah. Now, of course, you can't really. I mean, yeah, obviously there is a way to do it. Because, the CIA wants to listen to you, they're going to. But the funny thing is the law still remains. So when you buy scanners, that little swath of spectrum is still missing. Really funny. It was very easy to restore on most of the scanners, or listen on an image frequency on some of them. So anyway, cool stuff, Bob. Let me throw it back to you for any more comments.
No, not really on that particular subject. So we'll bring it around again, and then we'll see what, push it up the flagpole and see who's on.
That's fine. All right, Jed, KD2KJU. Anything on the subject so far, or something new?
First, I wanted to say, I'm sure you know the catamine lotion for poison ivy. Calamine. I'm sorry. What I do is I just pop those little bumps at the top up, and then stick something with calamine lotion on top of it and seal it for a little bit to dry everything out. But I'm guessing you have a way of dealing with it. Scanners, I have quite a few. I have the Radio Shack Pro 2052s. I have one up here and one in the garage. I enjoy them. I probably only have maybe 30 or 40 channels in both of them. I have a Bearcat 125 AT, which is a little handheld thing, but it's mostly been in service on my desk, and I really do like that thing. And then the priciest scanner that I have that I kind of like to put this thing on eBay, but the Home Patrol 2, which is a touchscreen, it sells itself as saying that you just put in your zip code and it will load everything in, but it's kind of all over the place. And, if you get everything out of the scanner, they want you to pay some kind of fee, which I'm not a big fan of. I guess if you're in your car or scanning, this might be a really great scanner. And Jim, for putting the scanner in the car, the way I read the law, that you cannot be in possession of a scanning device if you are committing a crime. Well, if you're getting pulled over, yes, you committed some type of crime. So it's just typical New York law, I guess. That's how I read the law. I could be wrong. Let me drop. And I believe it was Matt that was had the wrong band plan. For about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, I was looking at a band plan from the ARRL that was from 2007, and did not believe that I could transmit digital modes on 10 meters. and I was sitting there watching the traffic on FT8 one day and looking at some people's call signs, and they were taxed. Well, either all these people are kind of doing what they want, or I have something wrong. Quick Google search brought up the newest results, and yeah, but well, at least I thought I was doing the right thing. And I guess with that, I will send it back to you with that.
All right, Matt, I'll get to you in a minute. Yeah, that home patrol. Yeah, I'm familiar with those. Yeah, it's interesting. I guess if you want to pay for the updates, it's like, when we had the GPSs, before we all used our phones for navigation, how often you wanted to update them. And of course, there's ways to update if you have an older GPS unit that you still like to use. There's ways to put OpenStreetMaps data on them and things like that and update them for free. Kind of wonder if I imagine someone has probably figured out how to hack the home patrol and just load data on it manually. What I had done, that one Radio Shack scanner I had that did trunking, I had bought the software from the same company that we all get from for our ham radios. I believe it's the same company that does it, but I had a radio reference account and was able to log into my radio reference account on the software and load the scanner with the correct frequencies and even the trunking information. And that's how I got it working. So that was an alternative to paying subscription to Uniden for the home patrol. It still cost me a little bit of money, but it was a one-time purchase for the software. And the radio reference account is actually kind of handy, and it's not too expensive. So I usually renew it every year. Let me drop for a sec. W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday night. Science and Technology Net. It's always fun to play with these things. I was definitely into it more years ago than I am now. But all right, Matt, you had a comment. Pick it up, please.
Thanks, Phil. I just wanted to say to Jeff that I appreciate you trying to use my embarrassment a little bit. But my band chart was I actually did print it in 1991, so 20 years ago. So, gotta check these things once in a while. Back to that.
I just hear that dot matrix printer going. I hear it. I'm glad I don't hear them anymore. Anyway, all right. And we have some YouTube check-ins here. So John, 82UUI, was wondering if there was a methodology of picking an open band to broadcast on. There's some basics for John, depending on the time of day and the seasons. So, like this time of year, this time of night, 40 has been open probably for several hours and sometimes remains open late, sometimes starts closing up. And 75 and 80 have been open since, it started getting dark. Sometimes they open up a little earlier, and they usually, remain open through the night. As far as noise levels, it depends on what's going on. And it's not always because there's storms. Sometimes the atmosphere is just noisy. The sun sometimes gets angry. As a rule, those lower bands are the ones that are active at night. However, let me drop. It doesn't always, not everything always follows the rules. And sometimes some of your best DX anomalies will happen on a band that shouldn't be open. 20 meters sometimes will stay open late. You'll hear stations from the west where it's not dark yet, or stations from, Oceania or Asia, because those of us that grew up as shortwave listeners know that sometimes Australia and New Zealand would come in completely contrary to our idea of when bands were active. So every morning for many, many, many years, and it only stopped maybe, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, Radio Australia used to boom into this country. I mean boom, it was a strong signal on 9.580 megahertz every morning. And it stayed strong from pretty early in the morning until mid-morning. Let me drop. That was, propagation from another part of the world, not with relays or anything else, but definitely contrary to what you would expect. And if you wanted to listen to Australia or New Zealand at night, you looked to the higher bands. These are shortwave broadcast bands, but you can still relate them in frequency, to some of our action. So as the 15, 17, and 21 megahertz bands were where you could pick up Australia and New Zealand at night. So at night, lower bands, different levels of noise, different kind of propagation from winter to summer, but that's pretty much where you want to be. Then there's some other weird phenomenon that happens. You'll hear people talk about gray line effect. Gray line is something that can happen on 10 meters. You will also experience it on other bands, but it's usually where people are talking about it. And gray line occurs the gray line is the shift from day to night. And there's actually maps you can pull up on the screen that'll show you the zone that gray line communications are currently occurring in. They usually occur north to south, south to north, along that horizontal line or vertical line that is the gray line. And when the gray line is over us, other people who are affected by the gray line, South America, Caribbean, you might hear signals on a band that wouldn't normally be active at that time. And then there's all sorts of crazy phenomenon. Sometimes 6 meters opens up late evening. 6 is a very odd and unpredictable band. So John, the basic rule is low bands at night, high bands during the day, 40 pretty much active almost any time, but better early evening and early mornings. But there are exceptions to all those rules, and that's what makes this hobby so interesting. Let me drop. I want to acknowledge Chris, W2CRW, also, who checked in on YouTube. Chris was talking about he monitors public service a little bit on his TYT 9800, but he talked about his Kenwood RZ1 broadband receiver. And I just want to mention, Chris, I remember when you got that, and you've brought back a memory, because I didn't remember you were a ham until I forget, probably when I moved back up here from Long Island, but I remember your brother telling me about that radio when you got it, because I remember drooling over one when they came out at Guilford Associates in New Jersey. What a neat radio. A very, very broadband receiver, for those of you who don't know, that was DIN mountable, so you could snap it into a DIN mount in your dash. And it had a video output and would actually modulate video signals in the TV bands. And I think, even though there's no or very, very little analog TV anymore, I think it will demodulate a lot of the amateur TV, ATV, any of the analog ATV that's still out there. But that was a neat little feature of it, was that you could actually watch TV on it too. So neat little radio. I'm glad you still have it. Yeah, that was one that I always wanted to play with. I don't think it does sideband though. It would be cool if it did that too. So W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Let me throw it to Jim for comments on anything that's come up so far. If you're still with us, Jim. If not, we wish you well.
Thanks, Neil. Good to be a Jim here. Well, my experience with scanners goes way back. My first job out of college, I worked for Trojan Electronics. They were an electronic component supplier. Also had some radio, TV, stuff like that, some light commercial. And I worked for their commercial branch doing field service on PA systems, intercom systems, nurse call systems, a little bit of two-way, stuff like that. But when things were slow, you'd wind up going in the back onto the repair bench to keep yourself busy. Radio, TV, stuff like that. And back then, 75, 76 was when the CD craze hit and the scanners hit. So I got my foot fill of them back then. But I do remember something about the Uniteds and the Regencies and the Radio Shacks and stuff like that. They all took a standard crystal. Let me drop a second. And then I think if I remember right, the Bearcat had a different crystal. So you had to have two different stocks. And people get upset because if they came in with a Bearcat, we didn't have a good stock of Bearcat crystals because they were so unique, but we had all the other ones. So we took a little flack on that. But I do remember, I think it was Bearcat, came out with a very early programmable scanner. And it had combs that you would put in there. And they would go into sockets. And you would break teeth off of the comb to program the frequency that you wanted. And we would have a stock of combs in case people would change their mind and use up all their combs. But it reminded me of that with the 16 switches across the front and the mathematics to come up with the proper frequency. But this probably predated that one. Anyhow, that's it. K2BHM.
This is W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. I'm going to make a few comments there, and then we'll take some more check-ins. As a kid, you know, I was into shortwave radios. I don't know if it was before or after I had bought my Panasonic RF2200, which was not a digital readout, but it was the first shortwave radio I owned where you could actually tell what frequency you were on. Almost, you know, it wasn't precise, but it had a way of reading out, you know, pretty close to the nearest kilohertz within reason. You had to use some calibrator markers and other tricks, but it worked. The first programmable scanner that most radio enthusiasts saw, and it was an ad in the magazine that, if you remember, all the old electronics magazines had those cards where you circled the numbers and they would send you literature. There was a teaser ad in either Popular Electronics or Elementary Electronics talking about the revolution in scanning radios. And I sent away for the information, and I had the brochure for the Tenelec programmable scanner. It was the first one. It had a keypad and a digital display. And it was incredible. You know, no crystals and a digital readout. Just amazing, you know, to those of us that had never seen anything like that. And I remember looking it up on the internet recently when that memory came back to me. And yeah, that was the name, Tenelec. And they were the first. They didn't make it, though, obviously. Let me try. I don't remember combs. But it's interesting. There were definitely some commercial two-way radios that were programmed with something similar, where you had chips that were actually had little like almost tiny fuses in them. And, you know, they always talked about burning proms, you know, that expression about, you know, writing code onto a programmable read-only memory chip. These chips, they would say they would be burned. They were literally burned. That's how they were programmed, where they would burn through some of these little fusible links in the chip to get them programmed. So it was the equivalent of one of those little micro dip switches that looks, you know, about the size of an IC with all the little tiny switches on it, but it was a more permanent setup. And I always wondered, could you probably just replace those with one of those micro dip switches? Just do that. I worked at Radio Shack as an older teenager. Even went into their management training program at one point, but I remember having the different crystals. And the Bearcats used some sort of image frequency. So the crystal wasn't actually for the frequency you were going to receive, but for that with a little math problem involved. I believe that's what it was. And one more drop. When I worked at Montgomery Ward, I think I was 18 when I worked there, maybe 17. There was a scanner we were selling for a while, and I've seen this come up on eBay a few times. It was made by General Electric. It was, I think, a 4-band scanner, and it had what looked like a signal strength meter on it that read in frequency, megahertz. And what you would do was you would take one of the 4 channels and switch it to program mode, and it had a little tiny dial, and you would press a button, and it would read the frequency on this little meter, and you would tune it until it received what you were wanting to receive. It wasn't exact, obviously, so you had to find the frequency while they were transmitting, and then you release the button, and it would lock that channel on that frequency. So it was 4 tunable frequencies, but not crystal controlled. So it's one of the first non-crystal controlled scanners I had ever seen. It was an interesting idea, and it worked. So, all right, let me drop for a second here and see if there's anybody else who would like to check into the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net, where so far we've been talking about scanners, a little bit about the ARRL band plan and maybe its history, and a little bit about bands and timing and time of day. And John has been typing a lot of comments here on YouTube. I'm going to take a second to read them while we're doing more check-ins. So anybody else, come now with your call sign, your name, and your location. Okay. John's asking about amplifiers. You're not ready for an amp yet, John. He wants to know, because he's noticing that they can be kind of expensive. But do they really do a whole lot for you? Do they amplify your outgoing signal, reaching further, almost doing the work of a higher antenna? Well, so this is the thing. On the HF frequencies, altitude doesn't always work the same way as it does on VHF and UHF. I think Bob can confirm this. Bob is up higher than we are, and it does affect his HF signal, but not in the same way you would think. One of the things it does is it removes him from a lot of the noise that's down where everybody else is. But a lot of dealing with HF antennas, one of the terms you'll hear referred to frequently is takeoff angle. And if you're using an antenna that is transmitting at a decent takeoff angle up to the atmosphere, it really doesn't matter what your altitude is. And different antennas do different things. No, power and height do not do the same thing on HF. On VHF and UHF, they're going to have similar effects, yes, but still not the same, depending on what you're trying to do. I don't know. I've never operated with more than 100 watts on HF myself. So to me, an amplifier is something to get one of my QRP rigs up to regular operating power. Let me drop. That doesn't mean I don't know people who do this. People who will operate with 500 watts, a kilowatt, or what is legal limit? 1500? But I don't even know what the legal limit is because I don't know. I just find it challenging to operate the way I am. That's all. As I always tell, we were talking about fish briefly earlier. You know, if you could go someplace, cast a line, and catch a fish every time you threw your line in the water, or catch any kind of fish just by saying, I want to catch a whatever it is, and then it shows up on your line, it would be cool for about 10 minutes, and then it would get old really fast. So there's got to be some kind of challenge. Makes things interesting. W2NDG, and right. Pause for check-ins again, but if not, we'll bring it back up to the top. Now, any other check-ins come now? All right, one more trip through the list. We'll start back up with Jim, K2BHM again. Maybe you have thoughts on power as well.
Not really. I haven't done a lot of playing around with HF to be able to comment on it. No, nothing comes to mind. K2BHM.
No, that's fine. All righty. Paul from Rosendale. Any comments or anything new you want to add to the discussion? I think we'll run one trip through the list here and then probably end.
There's a question about legality. I got an FCC document here that says FCC docket PR docket 91-36 back in 1993. The whole thing about being able to receive frequencies that you're not licensed on. The preemption of local laws concerning amateur transceivers, not necessarily scanners, but transceivers capable of reception beyond amateur applications. That's the biggest, it goes through the whole spiel, and in the end it says, in conclusion, we hold that state and local laws that preclude possession in vehicles or elsewhere of amateur radio service transceivers merely on the basis that they're capable of receiving police or anything like that is not prohibited, and reception of frequencies is not prohibited by federal law, blah, 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 blah. It is inconsistent with federal objectives and is basically the FCC told the state you can't do that. So, whatever. That's for you, back to that.
All right, Paul, thanks. W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. I remember somebody arguing when Connecticut had the radar detector law that technically, because of their ham license, they were allowed to use the radar detector because it was just a radio receiver. I don't know how that flew, but Connecticut got rid of their radar detector law because it was just too expensive for them to constantly be fighting it. I'm surprised Virginia still has it. So anyway, that's my comment on that. Tom, into FCC. You're up next.
Good evening again, into FCC. Talk about antennas, and I had a G5 RV that was up about 70 feet and worked really great. Came down in a storm, and now I have this Alpha Delta, and it's up about 35 feet. Don't get out as well. I don't do as well. Same radio, the FT 897. So it's radio's been the same forever and ever. I'm looking, hopefully by the end of the summer, to get another antenna up a little higher. So I do think that a lower antenna, different takeoff angle, makes a big difference. And that's my comments.
Comment.
Go ahead, Jim.
Tom, I believe you mentioned something about counterpoise.
No, I don't remember anything about counterpoise.
I'm sorry, I have the wrong guy, but it was a question I wanted to ask whoever it was that had mentioned about the counterpoise as far as for the headset wires. So if you're listening, let me know, please. Thank you. Back to that.
That was Bob, K2LD, who had suggested it as a topic. But I am ill prepared for that topic tonight. But I may throw that at Dave for a Thursday night one. Does that answer your question?
Well, my question is kind of a weird one. I mean, but I'll wait for my turn.
That's fine. All right. Well, thanks, Tom. And I will mention, that was G5RV antennas. That is another one of those controversial ham antennas, where if you read up on them, half of the people you'll read up, have them rave about them. Best antenna they've ever had. Works fantastic. Talked to somebody on a moon of Saturn on theirs. And then the other half will tell you that they don't work. There's a flaw in the design. They're terrible. And the funny thing is most of the people who badmouth them either didn't have one or did, and they put it in their attic or some other, installation where it probably didn't work well. And as I mentioned to everybody before, I own an Alex loop. The PY1 AHD magnetic loop antenna. He was one of the first people to shrink the mag loop down to a portable size and really market it as a portable QRP antenna. Very effective. And I have been lectured by hams telling me that magnetic loop antennas don't work, that it's all hype and that the theory is wrong. And I tell them, something, I can sit here and listen to all your different things that you're telling me, but my logbook disagrees with you. I have found the antenna to be fantastic, actually. And it's the same thing. You'll see people who love them, people who hate them. Funny stuff. So maybe one of these days I'll try G5RV myself. But for now, I think I'm all set. I got the antennas I need. I just got to get them all up. All right. Matt, KB2GGF. What'll probably be the final round here. Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, now it's me up with the answer. Okay, I'll control myself. Takeoff range. That's the thing. As I said, as I mentioned earlier, I've been having fun exploring 7 meters. So I'm thinking I'm going to make myself a simple vertical ground for 7 meters. Hold it up into the sky with the help of the tree. So, but yes, take off angle, and there's so many things about this reflection transmission. What you say about the days and how they change the seasons of days, vacations, daylight, all sorts of additional phenomena. It's a great part of just operating, and you get to come up with this sort of experience. That's a lot of fun for me. So that was a nice change of thought for me. Just that. Everybody have a good night.
All right. Thanks, Matt. And I'll be able to compare once I get everything going here. I'm going to have 2 completely different antennas. One of those NFEDs like Mike has. I forget who else has the same one, but I have one of those that's going to get raised up right now. I just have my homemade one up, but I'm using the Balun or Un from that antenna. And I have my gap vertical that'll go back on the shed. And it's completely different kind of antenna. And Jim, aimed at you, and you're up next. Omnidirectional, all directions. So that should be interesting. KD2VAH, you're up next in the final round on the Sunday night OMARC Science and Technology Net.
Okay, I put up the second antenna, so both Baluns are right next to each other, a couple inches. And I had one Balun, the 103-foot one, the original one I put up, that comes down to a counterpoise that hooks up to my fence and pretty much does 175-foot counterpoise because all the wires attached. So I said, okay, on this one here, I will take this one down straight to the ground so as not to co-connect the antennas together. But then it dawned on me, whenever the connectors go into the connector that goes through the window, that too is grounded to the same ground. So basically, I've already connected both antennas together, whether I liked it or not. And with the exception of maybe driving a different ground, I don't know, or putting a different counterpoise going in the opposite direction, or just hooking the counterpoise to the fence and see what happens.
So I'm going to actually take a comment from someone on this, but I think you probably don't want to have those antennas coupled in any way. Definitely not when both radios are on. But even with the antennas not being coupled at all, it's probably not a good idea to have both radios on when you're transmitting on one. Because you can overload the front end on that radio. I'm going to throw this to Bob for comment real quick, K2LD.
Okay, in my research reading, you definitely don't have two radios on at the same time. Yeah, I agree. 100% you can blow one out very easily. But counterpoises should not be really connected to earth ground, is from what I am understanding. And it definitely shouldn't be connected to the station ground either. Looking at all the different diagrams and whatnot of the research that I did on it, the counterpoise can go to ground, but it shouldn't be a ground, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And they don't necessarily have to be the same length as the antenna, but they probably should be in the same general direction as the antenna as far as reflecting the signal properly. I hope that makes some sort of sense. Back to you, Neil.
W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. I've heard a lot of similar things. And the thing is that, once again, like I mentioned earlier and on the net earlier tonight, the theory, the numbers, the hard research doesn't always work for us. Sometimes it's a matter of experimenting. But yet, probably don't want the two radios on at the same time. An antenna switch is a great idea. So you can isolate one of the radios and have it connected to nothing. That'll definitely help a little bit. But I've kind of heard a lot of the same things. So, yeah, that counterpoise can be a ground, but probably not the same ground that everything else is hooked to. The other thing is really, really long counterpoises can cause odd effects on your antenna as well. And sometimes they behave almost as a ground. But one of the things, if you look up counterpoises and length, is that you will see different lengths suggested. And I believe one of the things you don't want is a length that's resonant on a band that you frequent, if that makes any sense. Bob, have you read that same thing in your poking around also?
Yes, there's a whole and it should be either a multiple of the first, second, third, or fourth harmonic of the band you want to be on. And if you want to be on multiple bands, which most people do, then they kind of have to jive together. And there's a whole formula as far as doing that. And what it came out to was a negative regression. It was, you could make it any length except these lengths because of that particular reason, that they will not be resonant with all the bands. So, yes, I did read things along that line, but there's more to it than that. And that's why I thought it might be a good conversation topic, in that you need a certain amount of coax between your radio and the antenna for resonance purposes. Like on a 160 meter setup that I was looking at, you have to have a minimum of 16 feet between the balance and the radio. Now, some people who have an antenna like right outside their window, 16 feet is a lot of coiled up wire. And if you coil up wire, that could also be an issue. So there's a lot of stuff that goes to it. I just thought it would be a good topic for conversation, especially to all the people putting up antennas now.
Comment.
I'll get to you in a second, Jim, but yes, yeah. And and once again, it's something I would want to do my homework on first. So, if Dave doesn't do it on a Thursday, we'll get back to it on here one night for sure. I agree with everything you've been saying. What I found, not every wire antenna requires a certain length coax, but a lot of them do, including the aforementioned G5RV. That's one that absolutely has to have a certain length coax, because that is the counterpoise. Go ahead, Jim. Pick up with your comment.
Well, on both balance to the radio to the shack room there's easily 30 foot and 16 foot from the balance just to the window part, and then from the window I got the entire garage before I get to my shack. So that part I'm covered with. On the first counterpose, I didn't hook it to anything. I used 103 foot wire, and I got so-so results. So I said, you know what, the heck with it. I brought the wire down, I hooked it to my metal fence, and it was like somebody gave me a linear. So on this particular one I just put up yesterday, I said, I don't know if I want to hook it right to the fence again. I said, because now I'm kind of using the same, I would be using the same counterpose, which would connect the antenna. But with that in mind, let me drop. The pass-through on my window is already grounded. One single ground goes to the ground. So every antenna, every coax that comes through there goes to the same ground anyway. So I don't know. Maybe I'll experiment with the counterpoise for the 74 footer compared to the 103 footer. And worst case, I'll drag it out in a different direction. Maybe it's like Bob's saying, the direction that the antenna is going, and just bury the wire quickly underground, which I guess is seen as the ground in comparison to a counterpoise, but I don't know. And it's funny because the 103 footer, as far as the counterpoise goes, it goes all the way off to the left from it, goes all the way around underneath of it, it comes back down the other side. And I don't know if I just got lucky and hit the right number or whatever, but that antenna does remarkable.
Welcome to ham radio. Just like I was saying before, the rules don't always apply, and it's because every situation can be different. And if you remember when Don came and talked to us, one of the things he talked about was ground conductivity, and that's one of the things that's going to affect the performance of your antenna as well. Is what's under your antenna? What's that ground look like? Interesting stuff, and you could go on forever about it. But the best antenna that you can buy is the one that works for you. I've heard that answered so many times. The best antenna is the one that works for you, and it's different in every case. This is what makes the hobby so much fun. All right, K2LD, Bob. Anything further on any of these subjects?
Quick comment.
Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, I know dang well I'm going to forget what I was going to say. As far as the two radios, yes, I have them both on. I listen to them, two different bands. And when I find whatever band I decide I want to talk on, I do shut the other one off. Because I do realize that the wires are too close, especially at the balance. No, I do shut the other one off. Yes, a switch would probably be easier, but sometimes it's just easier to turn it off. Besides that, I get to tune through both radios to find out which antenna is picking up the best, and then that's the one I'll use, and I will shut the other one off.
All right, good to hear. Good to hear. And I am going to suggest real quick before I do hand it over to Jim again. I'm Bob again. Sorry. Losing my place. MFJ, and I believe a couple other companies, make a rather complicated antenna switch that lets you choose between multiple inputs and multiple outputs. I have one somewhere. I have misplaced it. I don't know where it is. Hopefully it'll turn up someday. But it's one where you can pick multiple inputs, multiple outputs, basically antenna routing. So you can pick this antenna to that radio or that antenna to this radio. You'd probably need more than one of these, but just makes things interesting. And you definitely need one of those Dymo or Brother label makers with one of these. All right, K2LD, Bob, pick it up.
Okay, I didn't really want to add confusion to it. I thought I was going to just toss it out there so maybe we can just chew it out and talk a little bit about the possibilities and the good and the bad of some of the setup. It's probably best if we waited for 82H to come on board, and because he really has the electrical and physics part of it now pat as far as what should be done. And like you had said before, when you mentioned soil has a lot to do with it too. All depending on your amount of groundwater, your mineral content, and everything else has a good deal to do with how much you're actually really reflecting and defending. And as far as my elevation goes, it's not just elevation here. I'm in the middle of nowhere, and the electrical noise is very, very, very low. Some nights it's just amazingly low of how much you can really hear with the S meter not even budging off of zero, and you can still hear very, very well. And it does do that even with VHF because I can get from here, I can reach the Lake George repeater, which is about 120 miles north of me, and have an absolute perfect conversation with them up there. The elevation really makes a difference, but the noise level makes a bigger difference. And that's all I got. So, let me read all, and we'll catch you again. Keep rolling.
Thanks, Bob. And yeah, just further, it just further hammers home, what I'm saying is that everybody's situation is different. Yeah, like Bob is saying, it's not just because of his height. He is in a very low noise area. It does make a huge difference. And, your antenna performance is going to be completely different depending on the type of soil you're sitting on, how much moisture is in that soil, how close you are to salt water has a huge effect on radio. When you get into places like Long Island and the Jersey Shore, things like that, there's all sorts of things. And sometimes it's things around you that might be operating on frequencies you want to use or near them that can really affect what's happening with your radio. All sorts of things. Everybody's situation is different. And yes, the theory works. I'm not saying we shouldn't listen to the theory. I'm not saying we shouldn't listen to the numbers. But there's a point where things start to get wildly variable. And that's where you have to start looking at everything else. It does make it interesting. When I was living on the island and the last place we lived down there, I had extended the antenna a little bit. It worked pretty good, but it never worked right on 75 and 80 meters. I had an alligator clip that I would attach that basically hooked the counterpoise up, but that counterpoise was the heat registers. So we had baseboard heat in the room where the shack was, and those slant fin heat register covers, which ran the full length of the room. I would take an alligator clip and just clip it to the end of the heat register, and suddenly my radio would tune up on 80 meters, and did very well, actually. But there were a couple of amplified speakers in the house that I would have to make sure were turned off before I would try to transmit on 80 meters. Like Matt was talking before, then that some of that RF is coming back inside. Certainly better than burning my lips on my old Atlas 210X, though. Much better than that. All right. I've taken a while to get back to you, Jed, but if you're still there, KD2KJU, you are the last one on our list tonight for the second round. Anyway, I got cut off there. Sorry about that. But KD2KJU, Jed, you are the final person on the last round on the net tonight, unless we have a late check-in. So pick it up, Jed, if you're still there.
I was listening to you guys on 80 meters before. I have such bad interference here that I could take a few of you off. I could tell when Jim was talking, and I could tell, I believe, well, I guess I can't tell. I thought it was Bob was talking as well. But I have spikes on, and I'm not looking forward to taking care of it. But yeah, definitely enjoyed the conversation tonight. Grounding wise, I always feel like I'm hearing different, different ways to go, but I also realize that, certain situations might require some, a different setup. I also did want to say, back to, Matt's still around, looking at the old band plan. When I first started studying for my ticket, I was looking at all pre-91 stuff. Everything was pre-91. And, not a lot of changed basics, but there was a lot of stuff that just wasn't mentioned in the pages just yet in the newer books. So, I mean, the information's all correct and everything like that, but, you might be learning about stuff that's not on the test. I felt it was helpful. And I still have this book, so I don't think they're going anywhere. But enjoy the net, and I will send it back to you, Neil. KJU, thanks for running the net, guys.
All right. Thanks, Jed. And hopefully we can work on your interference problem at some point. I'll mention, I'm poking around on the bands here while we're talking. Tonight's one of those nights where there's still activity on 20 meters right now. I don't know where the people are. I haven't really tuned in any of them, but I see 3 or 4 stations in my waterfall here. So it's interesting, what can float in on a band that is technically not supposed to be active or not heavily used at a certain time of the night or day. So funny things happen. All right, we've reached the end of the list. We'll see if there are any last minute check-ins for the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Please come now. All right, nothing heard. Throw it out there for any final comments. Anybody have anything they want to add real quick before we shut things down? All right, that's fine. Okay, you have been listening to and participating in the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. This net is brought to you by the Overlook Mountain Amateur Radio Club, which operates this repeater, and you do not need to be a member of the club to participate in our nets. However, we do invite you to check the club out and look into becoming a member if you're not. You can find information about this club and its repeaters at omarcclub.org, omarcclub.org. There are 4 nets that are operated regularly on this repeater, and we welcome you to join all of them. Every morning at 8:35 a.m., we hold the 8:35 on the 8:05. That is a informal roundtable, not a directed net, started during the COVID pandemic and continuing now, just to make sure that everybody was okay, see who needed information, who needed assistance, or just needed to be social. We're used to being social, and a lot of us trapped up in our homes for so long really needed to be able to communicate. It was a great idea, and it continues. And I know I, for one, stumbled on the net, and it was perfect timing for me because I really did need a kind of sense of community at the time. Let me drop. Every night at 6:30. A rotating cast of OMARC characters hosts the 6:30 check-in net, a more directed net, but still very casual, with a similar theme as the morning net. We go around and talk about what we did during the day, and if we need any assistance, any help, or have any questions we need answered. Anything from antenna questions to sharing of recipes. It's a lot of fun, and as Dave says, goes great with your coffee after dinner or before dinner if you eat late. Let me drop. Every Thursday at 8 p.m., Dave, K2JLV, our president, hosts the Thursday Night Technical Net. Dave travels around the check-ins and looks for a topic like we did tonight. And if a topic, a problem, or a question does not come from the first round, Dave spins the wheel of topics and comes up with one on his own, which I'm going to suggest the topic of counterpoises. For sure. But if not, yeah, maybe like Bob said, we'll make sure that Joe is on here one night and we can do that on here because I would like to have him present for that. So that's 8 o'clock. And every Sunday night, this net, hosted by myself and Jim, K2BHM, the Sunday night OMARC Science and Technology Net, where we explore science and technology topics not always related to ham radio, although we went in that direction tonight. I thank everybody for attending. We're going to return this repeater to its regular operation. I'm going to end the YouTube stream now, but as usual, I will hang out for 5 or 10 minutes if anybody wants to continue to chat. This is W2NDG, ending the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Everybody have a good evening. 7-3.